Can we get started? So the team is assembled. They've done a lot of hard work. I think people have been requesting this meeting for quite some time. But I want to congratulate both departments on fire and police for the work both teams have done to help us help figure this out. And then Mike, your team, as far as the finance and HR and everybody working to come to a solution. I know that it went back and forth for a while, but I know the chiefs kind of are where they want to be. And I think that the departments should be very pleased with where we've come to. So I'll ask the commissioners, we're going to present it to you, and then maybe at the end hold questions, just because it may take a while to get through it. There's a lot of data and information that you're going to absorb. We're not voting on anything at the end of the meeting. We will vote at our next commission meeting. And if you have questions, HR or finance or Mike or Brenda, you're welcome to ask them. The idea is if you have any suggestions to improve the plan, feel free to ask those questions or whatever. But there's a lot of hard thought that gone to every time we made one move, something else would happen and something else would happen. So the team has really done a very thoughtful, purposeful job of coming through this. And I think you'll be pleased with what their suggestion is to the commission. So Michael will start it off and be prepared to sit here for an hour. So.
Great. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Good afternoon, and thank you for your time this afternoon. And I want to thank all of those who are in attendance as well. Thank you for joining us. First, I just want to direct your attention to the City of Fargo website, fargond.gov/PSST. That's the URL where you're going to find all of the materials that we discussed today. That's available for download, and you can also scan this QR code as well. We're really eager today to share this information and the results of our discussions and collaboration between the public safety departments, the finance, administration, and human resources teams over the last several months. Commissioners, as the mayor just mentioned, if you do have a question, if you could do us a favor and mark what slide that question may be on. We'll return to that slide then at the end of the presentation and our remarks and address the question at that time. I just really want to thank everyone who's had a role in getting us to this point today. A lot of work, a lot of effort. There are also a lot of other individuals not at this table today that had a role in helping us out and assisting in the development of this proposal. So we want to acknowledge their efforts as well. And finally, I also want to acknowledge, and it would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, the government, communications and government affairs staff for pulling together this presentation material and coordinating everything that you're about to see this afternoon. So our presenters today from Team Fargo are listed here, from Human Resources, Finance, Administration, and the two public safety departments. And then we're also joined by Christy Reitz. Jill will formally introduce Christy. Christy is with MRA, and MRA has been our compensation consultant for over 2 decades. And so we enjoy a long relationship with MRA. And so Christy will talk about her work and her efforts a little bit later as it relates to this project. We really started this work back in January, and then that was some of the earliest work. Susan will talk about that and reference that. But we really got going and got a little bit more intense with our meetings and our regular discussions in March. And really from March to present day, our teams have really been underway with several extensive collaborations on not only the presentation you're about to see today, but also just on how to implement this public safety sales tax plan and really honor the wishes of the voters that approved it last fall. I think you'll find at the end of the day, this is really about a balanced and unified approach, and it's been one that has been thoughtfully developed to make sure that we are honoring the public's wishes and intents. I'll start first on the fire department. We have a couple of slides each about the departments at the outset, and then they'll have some more in-depth conversations later with you. But as it relates to the fire department, the city last adjusted the fire department pay structure in 2018. Obviously, since that time, we have done cost of living adjustments and made other, I'll call them micro adjustments to the pay structures. But substantially what we have in place today has been in place since 2018. It just simply has not kept pace with market conditions and demands across our region. This has really limited our ability in the Fargo Fire Department to simultaneously invest in new positions, invest in the pay plan, as well as capital and our future facilities. So we've tried to balance many priorities, but we just have not had the revenues, frankly, to be able to invest in everything at the same time. Similarly, in the police department, we have a story where the police department also has experienced an exponential increase in growth over the last decade plus, and our community growth has simply outpaced our ability at the city of Fargo to invest the necessary revenues to meet the staffing needs of the department. The police chief has a very good goal, a strategic goal of 1.6 sworn officers per 1,000 to serve the residents and businesses of Fargo. And so at the same time, we've also asked the police department to also think about technology, an immense amount of new technology that has really improved our service delivery in the public and for the citizens, but has really created quite a demand on our resources and our available revenues. So again, a similar story where the existing revenues simply were not keeping pace. And so the technology alone, as well as the facility improvements that we're going to be talking about in a little bit, will help us meet the needs of the future of Fargo. I thought it'd be also important just to refresh, not only for the commission, but for the public watching here today, what happened back in November. This was the public vote that occurred on November 4 of 2024. And just as a reminder of where this all started, this is a summary of those election results. In total, 55,581 individuals cast a vote in that special ballot measure. And of those 55,581 votes, 36,630 were cast in support of the public safety sales tax. So that's why we're here today. So it's probably important to talk about not only that moment, but the moments that happened right after that vote in November, December, January, et cetera, as we talk about our timeline. What you're about to see in these boxes are the steps that occurred after that vote and where we find ourselves today. And as you will follow those boxes, you'll see that really from November through May, we endeavored to have many, many internal conversations about planning for the implementation of the public safety sales tax and how we would bring that into effect to honor the wishes and the intents of the voters. And so I think that the other piece that has happened in that same time, of course, is that very extensive and close collaboration and coordination with the two public safety chiefs, as well as their departments. This input has been incorporated throughout our process, and you will see entirely within the proposed plan today. That input was heard, it was taken in, and it was in fact modeled into the plan that you're going to see here today. I also want to make one note about the timing of the sales tax proceeds. We find ourselves today on May 14th. In approximately a month, we will start to see some of those dollars become available for transfer into the city's general fund. So by mid-June, we will start seeing those dollars that were beginning to be collected here this spring be available for allocation in the city budget. And so every year going forward, not only this year, but every year going forward, about this time of the year, the City Commission is really going to be asked to thoughtfully consider how we utilize those sales tax proceeds as they come in and find their way to the city's general fund. All of this to suggest that we need to really maintain a balanced and sustainable approach. You'll hear that theme from finance, from myself, and our entire team throughout the duration of this 20-year period, but especially in this first 10 years, is to making sure that we are being thoughtful, we're being careful with the information that we assemble, and that we maintain that balance throughout. Really what we're talking about today, I like to think of it as the start of a 10-year vision. This will be something that is implemented pretty aggressively in 2025 and in 2026, but the decisions we make in 25 and in 26 will really be with us for that first 10 years before we have a pretty comprehensive check-in to see what the last half of the sales tax period will look like, the latter half of the 20-year sales tax. So it's really incumbent on us as your senior leadership team to really think about and manage the sustainability and the durability of this plan. And so we'll be working with the City Commission quite directly every single year as you will be annually overseeing the public safety sales tax, not only to make sure it's meeting the needs and demands of today, but maintaining that accountability to the voters and the public that approved the sales tax, and making sure that it responds to their desires and their priorities that they expressed. So our public safety priorities are those that came, quite frankly, from our departments. And so these words that you see on your screen are those concepts, those thoughts, those people, the priorities, the projects, the equipment that our public safety teams really thought would best serve the community moving forward in the future. And so I won't read all of these here, but you can see that you'll see a blend of things, whether it's people in specific positions, but probably most importantly, it was about creating a market competitive pay structure and trying to keep us current in 2025 and beyond. I want to acknowledge the public safety leaders as well for all of their time that they invested in this. That word bubble that we just looked at is just one example or illustration of what was advanced, but our dialogue and our communication has been outstanding from the beginning. I just really want to acknowledge their efforts in this process since the voter-approved measure came to be. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Jill Manette, our Human Resources Director, and what she's going to talk about next are some of the actual pay structure adjustments. And you'll hear a date that we'll keep referring to of July 7th. That's going to be our proposed date that we implement the pay structure adjustments in the city of Fargo. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jill.
Thank you. So before we get into the details of the pay structure adjustment, I want to start by looking at our sworn public safety workforce. So we currently have 192 sworn positions in the police department, which makes up 58% of the combined police and fire sworn personnel. We have 138 fire positions, which make up 42% of the combined sworn workforce. So in total, we have 330 sworn public safety positions, and together they make up around 30% of our whole regular workforce across the city of Fargo. Later, we're going to discuss the proposal to grow the public safety workforce with both sworn and civilian positions. So last fall, when we began discussing our approach to reviewing public safety compensation and benefits, we had several objectives in mind. The primary focus was conducting a regional markets survey to ensure that we were competitive within the regional market. We also wanted to consider compression and any issues that existed within our current plan, including eliminating or minimizing overlapping of our pay steps. Adding positions within both fire and police was also identified as a key priority. Being appropriately staffed is really a key component to retention and to supporting work-life balance for our employees in these departments. So the HR team regularly surveys and conducts our regional compensation and benefits survey. Over the last several years, we've collaborated with our department leaders to really determine which cities within our region provide the best comparisons across the city. So currently, we invite over 30 cities to participate in the survey. As we are working with our department leaders on a compensation philosophy, we plan to identify a core group of approximately 15 cities, and that would narrow our scope for future regional compensation and benefit surveys. The compensation philosophy, along with that list, that shorter list of comparable cities, will be presented to you all at some point during the budget process for your review and approval. As you know, last year during the budget process, we brought a proposal for a new citywide pay plan, and that was developed to make our entire pay structure more market competitive. The 2025 budget did not support the implementation cost of that plan, but we were able to implement a 4.5% cost of living adjustment for 2025. So today we're focusing just on market competitive public safety pay. And again, this was developed collaboratively with administration, HR, finance, police, fire leadership teams, and with the help of MRA. So we've been meeting at least weekly to analyze the market data and develop a new proposed pay structure, and really to determine what the best sustainable plan is to implement the new pay plan. So MRA has served as the city's compensation consultant for over 25 years, as Michael mentioned. The job evaluation system that we have utilized for several years was created by MRA, and they have regularly conducted our customized surveys, so those regional surveys that we talk about. Christy Reitz, the Compensation Director for MRA, is with us today and will be presenting the results of that Regional Public Safety Comp and Benefits Survey, as well as the proposed pay structure. In your packets in front of you, you do have the full summary of the Public Safety Market Survey process and ultimately the results of that survey. So in the presentation, Christy will be covering just a couple of positions from each department that were surveyed. But again, you have more information in your packet for your reference. So Christy, thank you for joining us in person today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So first, what I'm going to talk about is, or today what I'm going to go over is the base pay from the Compensation and Benefits Survey. I'll give some background, go over findings, and then discuss the proposed structure. First, MRA and Fargo determined the regional market. To identify municipalities, we looked for those of similar size, having similar offerings, and who Fargo competes with in the labor market, which is defined as your local market. MRA surveyed 37 municipalities across the region highlighted on the slide. 23 responses were received from the municipalities listed over to the right. And the local market is further defined by the asterisks and include Bismarck, Grand Forks, West Fargo, Moorhead, and Sioux Falls. So within market pricing, MRA always assigns market competitiveness based on the definitions on the slide, with 100% being the target market comparison. So when we're looking at market rates, we define that as 95 to 105%. Within market is going to be 90 to 95%, or on the other side, 105 to 110%. And then anything outside of market is going to be less than 90% or more than 110%. The following slides are going to cover the current entry and top steps and how they compare to the regional market averages based on their rank. So the first one is firefighter. We're looking at the current range spreads. That's your entry step to top step is approximately 36%, which is consistent with the market range right below that of 37% range spread. However, you do see that the current steps are beginning to lag market. That's your 91% underneath there. And then for fire captain, your current range spreads are 42% versus the market range spread of 17%. With this more narrow range, you can see the comparison to entry is very low, while the comparison to top step falls more in line, but still lags slightly. Fargo ranges are broader. However, the lower rates in the range are not utilized as the employees promoted are already well above that entry step when they're promoted into those management ranks. So keep in mind that no employees in the captain role is receiving the entry step you see here. And for police officer, the current range spread, again, from entry to top step is 48%, which is consistent with the market range spread of 42%. However, you do see that the current steps are lagging behind the market. So for police lieutenant, you're going to see something similar here that we're seeing with the fire captain, which is that your current range spreads of 42% are much broader than the market range spread of 23%. Again, with this more narrow range, you can see the comparison to entry is very low, while the comparison to top step falls more in line, but still lags slightly. And again, with that entry step for the captain, or for the lieutenant, it's similar to the fire captain in that that entry step is typically not utilized because once a lieutenant or a sergeant is promoted into a lieutenant, they're already making well above that actual entry step listed. So the next phase, once you look at the market data, we go into a structured development. So how do we start correcting some of the things that we're seeing from the market, which is those narrower range spreads, and then how do we get more market competitive in your ranges? So each sworn rank has its own pay range, and subsequently, it's a separate pay plan that has been created that is different from the full city. Ranges were then compared to the regional market average, and you'll be able to see that in the coming slides to determine if the proposed structure is more competitive. And then we successfully addressed the Public Safety Department's concerns regarding pay overlap between supervisors and direct reports. So for these slides, they're a little hard to read, but you do have a printout here that's these two. So you can see what we wanted you to have a full look at what the pay structure looks like with that no overlap. And then underneath each one, you can see how those rates are compared to the market rates. So you can start to see how we are better aligning, especially those top steps for each rank to the market comparison. You can also see on here underneath the dollar amounts, those are the increases or step increases per year. And then again, you can see the market comparison with the new structure. Excuse me. So here is where we're seeing how that proposed entry and top step start to align better with the market comparisons. And you will see on the next slide how the entry step and top step are now corrected in better aligning with market and having a more narrow range spread to them. For police officer as well, here we're correcting for that lagging of market. We're getting it more in line to what the regional market averages were. And then for police lieutenant, again, we're correcting for the market comparisons and also no overlap with the management rank below and above it.
Thank you, Christy. So I just want to reiterate that, we really arrived at the proposed pay structure that you just saw through collaboration among the departments and with Christy at MRA. So our primary goal was to develop a public safety plan that was market competitive and of course also needed to be sustainable. Under the proposed plan, all sworn employees would receive a market adjustment. The amount of the adjustment really depends on each employee's placement in the current pay plan and their years of service. In some cases, certain employees are receiving lower increases because they may be newer to the position or their current rate of pay was already close to market. In other cases, larger increases were necessary to align the positions with that new pay structure and to maintain internal equity to the extent possible. So as a team, we looked at several options for implementation of the proposed pay structure, again, sustainability being that critical factor. We arrived at a proposed structure that is market competitive. Our sworn fire employees will receive an average market adjustment of 7%. Our sworn police employees will receive an average market adjustment of 5%. All sworn employees will receive at least a 3% market adjustment as they move from the current structure to the new pay structure. So again, we're proposing that we implement the new structure and market adjustment on July 7th, which is the start of the first full pay period in July. So to give you an overview of the full 2025 pay increases for the average sworn public safety employee, again, all sworn employees received the 4.5% COLA on the first payroll of 2025. If approved, they will receive a market adjustment on July 7th, averaging 7% for fire, 5% for police, but again, no less than 3% for any individual. And so in addition, those who are not at the maximum pay of the pay range either have received their step increase already this year or will receive their step increase between now and the end of the year. Those typically range from 4 to 6%. Just a reminder, not everyone receives those if they're at the max of the current structure. But those increases combined will bring our public and safety employees to a competitive rate of pay with the market. So we intend to review the public safety pay plan annually to ensure that our pay structure remains competitive going forward as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thank you, Jill. The key to this plan is a balanced approach. Through the next financial section, I'd like to show you how we arrived at a balanced plan in which we're addressing the priorities identified by the public safety chiefs while still being respectful of the resources that are available to us. With any financial model, you must start with some assumptions. With these assumptions, we're looking to be realistic, but we want to err on the side of being conservative. The first thing we need to identify is what resources we can reasonably expect to be generated with the new sales tax. Based on City of Fargo sales tax trends, we estimate that a quarter cent equals approximately $8.5 million in 2025. Since the tax was implemented on April 1st, we'll only be collecting 75% of that in 2025. That number will be reported later when we talk about our specific request for 2025. What this graph is showing is the revenue curve on an annual basis, assuming 2% growth per year. This starts at the first full year next year with revenues of $8,670,000. And then we've modeled this to the midpoint of the tax, year 10, with that revenue projected at $11,650,000. And as a basis for our growth assumptions, we've looked at post-COVID sales tax growth. The average has been about 3% per year. However, last year we were just under 1%, so we picked 2% as our growth assumption. And as Jill said, and we'll continue to say throughout the presentation, we are committed to reviewing the financial plan on an annual basis in conjunction with the budget preparation. Any deviations from the plan assumptions, including the growth, could be higher or lower sales tax growth trends, will be considered as we update the plan for priorities identified at that time. While the tax is approved for 20 years, we focused our financial model on the first 10 years and really drilled down on the first 3 years. The model is very sensitive to revenue and expense changes, and many things can and will change into the future. We've listed just a few here: sales tax growth, state legislative initiatives that impact revenues, city population growth, city footprint expansion, public safety needs and service demands, and technology innovations. So again, as part of our annual budget process, we're committed to evaluating the model and review and prioritize public safety needs relative to the available resources. Our goal was to develop a plan that balances the current priorities of the public safety departments with the long-term sustainability given the revenue assumptions. So to the commissioners, the graphic on this slide may look familiar to you. As soon as the tax was passed in November, Finance started to pencil out the logistical accounting details along with the framework to help us achieve a balanced plan. How can we use this tax to the most good while being mindful of long-term obligations and financial considerations? We discussed this concept and the very simplistic visual at the January Finance Committee meeting. On this slide, I model out how we would utilize the sales tax receipts collected in 2025 when we already have an approved 2025 budget prior to the tax passing. This is going to require a 2025 budget adjustment, which is one of the items listed in the motion that we're proposing. And then I also modeled out how we would incorporate the tax receipts and public safety expenses into future budgets, including 2026, as we're doing right now. We will be asking for your approval of the 2026 public safety sales tax plan in advance of the full 2026 budget, so we can build the 2026 budget around some of the decisions within the plan. Before we look at some spreadsheet depictions, I want to reiterate a few points related to the financial plan. First, the plan was a result of hard work, thoughtful discussion, and compromise among the staff around this table. $8.5 million per year is a significant sum of money, but it doesn't accomplish all of the public safety department's requested new items. As you recall from an earlier slide, these big departments have very long lists of priorities. In full transparency, it's far too early to plan to incorporate this spending into the general fund after the 20-year sunset. With so many unknowns, it's impossible to speculate beyond just a few years into the future. However, this model ensures that we're not spending more than anticipated revenues over a 10-year period. Ongoing discussions will need to be had to address the second decade of the tax, along with plans for years 21 and beyond. So let's take a look at the financial model. This first slide is just going to show what we're requesting action upon, which is the 2025 and 2026 plan. This table depicts anticipated revenues, then spending totals by category, by department, and the net over and under. I know this print is small. We're going to get to more specifics on subsequent slides, and there's also a very detailed sheet in your take-home materials. But I wanted to use this to point out a few key items. The very top line is revenues with annual growth, and then we have sections for fire and police, and within those we have basically 4 different kind of categories of expenses. The first one is the pay structure that has already been presented. Year 25 shows the incremental cost of the new pay plan. So what that means is, what is the new pay plan going to cost versus what it cost under the old pay plan? And then it's only a half a year, of course. And then in year 2026, same thing, implementation cost, but it's for a whole year. And then it also included the estimated cost of living adjustment and step increases. So that's an important concept. This model needs to carry the ongoing incremental costs of the pay plan, staff, equipment, and facilities. There's not capacity within the general fund to absorb these. This is not a new $8.5 million every year. The second item is personnel, so new staffing requests. The chiefs are going to talk about those specific details in just a second. Same concept though in 25, it's the incremental cost of the new personnel for a half a year. And then in 2026, it's that same incremental cost, but for a full year, and then it includes any estimated cost of living or step increases. The third kind of bucket, if you will, is equipment and facilities, so new and upgrades. Some of these items, particularly the technology, have ongoing costs that the model needs to capture. And then the fourth item is contributions towards existing public safety obligations. I'm going to talk about that in a slide in later. These are the building blocks. So the extension is that we show this model over 10 years by the same department and the same groupings. The key to this slide is the bottom line. In the early years, we're underspending. In later years, spending exceeds revenue. But as you can see, at the end of 10 years, we have spent just under tax generates. Now, this is just a model for a snapshot in time. We completed this exercise to ensure that the decisions that we're making now for 25 and 26 are sustainable. Again, we'll be looking at this on an annual basis to make any adjustments for other factors like sales tax growth or priority changes. So I've been told that not everybody shares my love for spreadsheets and a lot of tiny lines and numbers on a page. So this is just a quick graphic of the net over and under. As we can see, we're underspending in the green the first few years, overspending a little bit later, but at the end, we're only spending what we've taken in. As we've all said many times, this plan was about balance. That means balance between public safety departments and their wide variety of priorities. But to all of us around this table, it also must mean balance relative to the city of Fargo as a whole. Public safety costs comprise nearly $60 million within the city's general fund, 42%. As these ongoing expenses continue to rise, so too will the general fund contribution towards public safety. This is not going away with the public safety sales tax. The costs that we've discussed related to this new tax are over and above what is paid through the general fund. Remember that I stated that pay plan and personnel costs of the plan are incremental costs. The vast majority of payroll and operating costs for public safety continue to be borne by the general fund. To that end, we've applied a balanced approach relative to overall city financials. 80% of the public safety sales tax, which we're calling the primary usage, is utilized towards ongoing costs of new and updated items, things that we've just talked about: public safety pay structure, new personnel, facility updates, and equipment, primarily technology. 20% of the public safety sales tax, which we're referring to as the secondary usage, is utilized towards existing public safety debt service and annual public safety capital needs, primarily vehicles. This allocation is less than half of the full expense, with the majority still being borne by the general fund or the capital fund. In a moment, I'm going to provide more specifics on the secondary usage. However, the chiefs are going to go through the primary usage, and I'm going to start with Chief Dirksen.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. In the short term here, we had some goals for 25 and 26 that we've incorporated into the plan. Number one for the fire departments, from our perspective, was retention and recruitment of employees. We've seen a significant decrease, or people leaving for different reasons, and we needed to fix some of the issues within the pay plan. So that was number one, and I think this plan does that. We also wanted to increase some of our staffing. That is a need for us, especially as we continue to get busier in the downtown area. Our plan is to add 6 new personnel in 2025 that would be able to respond in a quick response unit. It'll take probably the rest of 25 to get that done, but we need to hire them now so that they can be in place for maybe a 2026 beginning of operation. But that provides us additional people. It's our busiest station, helping to respond to that. We have that unit reliability to handle the calls from in the downtown. We also look at, we have an aging station alerting system, which is nearly 20 years old. And what we learned with Fire Station 8 is we could not purchase that same alerting system that tells our firefighters that there's an emergency to respond to. So with Station 8, we had to purchase a different system. Since we've implemented that system, 2 other stations have experienced problems, and we are in the process of getting those fixed and replaced. And so adding that in and making a wholesale change throughout all of our 8 stations is the right thing to do at this time. The next thing is a fire facility study. We have approximately 10 facilities that we manage, and not all of our buildings meet the current requirements. We have one station that we would like to put a fire sprinkler system in that doesn't have one. We have required, it's in all of our other buildings, so that's a need going forward. Our aging burn building and training facility was built back in the 60s. It has seen its better days. all of the heating from burning in it and cooling it with water and doing that all back and forth has caused issues with the concrete in there, and that building is becoming unsafe, so we need to replace that. And along with that is our Fire Station 4 is in the same boat. It was built in the 60s, almost 60 years old, and we need to look at replacing that because of trying to do the repairs is going to be more cost prohibitive than maybe replacing that. And that's what hopefully that facility study will provide for us, and also provide what that cost is going to be to replace that and locate them. And the key in 2025 is there's a big chunk of money that's being stuck in for those kind of things in the future. As we plan for those facilities, we know we need to do them. In order to make sure that this is long-term and sustainable, is to set that aside for going forward. In 2026, we're looking to add another firefighter to the department, as well as a fire data analyst to add transparency and to help us make decisions as we go forward in our response models, and where do we maybe in the future need to have stations and in our future planning, but also just to tell the public and help us better analyze how quickly we can respond and where our gaps are within the city as far as response goes. The other thing in 2026, we would take a current firefighter and promote one to a fire training position, and then again, the earmark into additional dollars for those future facilities to handle those needs. And then going forward, we would look at making sure that we are monitoring and adjusting the plan. Like I said, this is only for half a year and a year. And going forward, when does that Fire Station 9 need to be built and staffed? And that Fire Station 10 possibly, as the city continues to grow, those could be things that we need to look at going into the future, but we need to be able to monitor that growth. So we would look at over the next year and a half of increasing our sworn positions by 7 and a non-sworn position by 1 to bring the total in the fire department to 149 personnel.
Thank you, sir. In terms of the police department, our priorities were competitive pay, personnel, which we've been, as discussed earlier, way behind on over a long period of time, and facilities as well. So again, looking at the plan collectively, as Susan described, and trying to come up with the best option with the proposed revenue that was available. I think we came up with a good pay plan that addressed the needs that we thought were important on the compression side. And so you'll only see, because our academies run January and February, you won't see any new sworn people until 2026 because we don't have the ability to do an academy until then. But we are able to add a civilian position in 25. The police operations technician is a position that handles all the IT things that are involved in just about every investigation we have. Video, phone downloads, all these things are critical pieces of evidence that our detectives and investigators have to deal with. We have one ops technician now who's currently completely full without additional capacity. And as this continues to grow and be an important part not only of investigations, but court cases, and there's time expectations there, that'll be an important civilian position to add and help with that workload. We've got some technology here in terms of Axon Draft 1, which utilizes our existing Axon body cameras to assist with reporting narratives. And so there's some AI involved in that. The officers still, of course, have to complete the report and do all the defined details, but there's some time savings and efficiencies in adding this into our existing package. The Peregrine system is a data system that takes all of our disparate databases, which there are many, and puts them into one dashboard for our personnel when they respond to crimes for the cops, when they're doing investigations for the detectives, and at the real-time crime center when they're looking at something or someone. All of that information related to the individual or the location from all those different databases comes into one dashboard for quick ease of use and efficiency. And then the fit up of the headquarters for the crime centers is basically creating some sufficient work locations for that real-time crime center and our crimes against children area, which currently operate in more of an open area environment, not incredibly expensive, about 25 grand. And a small amount for the fit up of the motorcycle unit. The vast amount of that money is the mobile police vehicle barriers, which we thought as a police department was important to our public, that we found a way to quickly get those on the street this summer. And the only way to facilitate that with, of course, the commission's approval was to get those tabbed onto the public safety sales tax. That's $372,000 that is tabbed onto this budget for the PD, but again, we thought that was the right thing to do, but I just wanted you to be aware of that. Our personnel in 2026, as we build the department, of course, we have to build it in a logical, constructive manner, right? You have to add people at all levels of the organization so that we maintain sufficient supervision, middle management, command, et cetera. So working within what was available, our first priority was the 3 lieutenants because that will allow us to have a shift commander for our young department 24/7 every day of the year. We currently don't have that, and so we have sergeants underfilling. So that helps getting that shift command position in there and being able to have the sergeants on the street all of the time supervising also that young department. The addition of 1 new police sergeant to start our wellness unit, which has been extremely successful, tons of good feedback, and I think it's been not only a recruitment but a retention tool for our department, and it's been also nationally recognized for the work that's been done there. So also with the people that we've got out on leave and injury, 10 to 15 a week, managing those people. So there's a lot of work there that currently is being double duty, if you will. That sergeant would head that unit. And then 5 new police officers. These would actually be officers assigned to the Neighborhood Services Division, which would be the first new police officer, call taker type cops on the street that we have added in many, many years. Our traffic safety team that we added is proactive and is specific to traffic. So this will be the first group of new officers in many years that will bolster the Neighborhood Services Division. Our wellness coordinator, which we had supported with a grant, that funding is running out the end of this year. And creating that as a permanent civilian FTE also fits in with that wellness plan, and she's done tremendous work and really great support within the department and allows that to continue. The Axon body-worn camera renewal is a renewal of our contract for that Axon body camera, things that we have, and there's some enhancements that come with that. The Axon Draft 1 is what we talked about earlier, but the technology that comes with this and continues to come as a already purchaser, practitioner of the Axon body-worn camera system, when technology upgrades are made, we get the benefit of that technology without extra cost. It's part of the package. We get our tasers replaced regularly and the cartridges that are needed to test fire them on a regular basis. All in the storage is all part of this package. The other thing that we'll have with the new package coming out is the ability to translate multiple languages, 100-some languages through the body-worn camera, which again will be a lot quicker for the officers on the street. As you know, our community's got a lot of languages with 10% non-foreign born in our population, and it saves them the time of trying to make a phone call and paying a separate provider to do that type of language translation. So there's a lot of good stuff there. And then the vehicle piece, on average, it's 1 new police car per 3 officers. And so that with the monies available as the 2026 personnel in those pieces, but we do, however, have facility needs. As you're aware from the Public Safety Facilities Management Plan that the Commission passed, I believe, January of '24. And so both in terms of age, utility, meaning use, and location, those facilities needs will continue now and in the future, and we'll continue to work that plan. We weren't able to put, per se, a line item revenue in 2026, just again based on working as collectively as we could to utilize what was available. Thank you.
Thank you both for talking through the primary usage. I'm going to talk through the secondary usage. Again, that was that 20% that I talked about. There are 2 components. The first included is debt service on public safety facilities. The City of Fargo maintains debt on 5 facilities related to public safety. That would be 3 fire stations, the police department headquarters, and then a small fraction of Fargo, which is Fargo's share of the regional dispatch center. Debt service payments of $2.4 million per year is paid by the general fund. We've allocated less than half of the annual debt service to be paid by public safety sales tax, proportionate by department. So for fire, that would be $510,000 for the first few years, and then one of the bonds gets paid off, and then that will be decreased to $435,000. Police would be $582,000. This balanced approach will alleviate some of the cost burden within the general fund. The second item is our capital pool. All general fund departments' capital requests end up in a capital fund, which is funded by transfers from the enterprise funds. Every year, the budget team goes through the requests and approves or denies based on available funding. Public safety equipment, like police cars and fire trucks, generally get a higher priority than most requests, other than maybe a snowplow or some backbone technology infrastructure. We've allocated about 50% of the 3-year average capital approvals for fire and police, proportionate by department. So for fire, it's $375,000, and police, it's $525,000. This balanced approach should free up some capital funding for deferred requests of other general fund departments and/or allow additional enterprise transfers into the general fund. So I spent a lot of time on lists and complicated spreadsheets with a bunch of numbers. The comms team has put together a couple graphs to help illustrate some closing remarks on the plan. So this represents 25 through 27. This is the expense categories for the different proposed expenditures. The multicolored boxes represent the specific buckets by expense by department. The intent here is to show the variety of approved items and the movement from year to year within some of the categories. These expenses are balanced among primary uses of the new pay plan, new personnel, equipment, and facilities, and secondary uses of existing public safety debt service and contributions towards the capital fund for public safety, ongoing public service capital items. This visual shows what I was trying to explain regarding the growing implementation costs of the pay plan and personnel. So if you look at the red and the kind of royal blue, those are the pay plans. You can see that it doubles from 25 to 26 because 25 is only a half a year and 26 is a full year, but then it also increases annually with steps and COLAs. Through thoughtful discussion and compromises, we arrived at these allocations. The green dotted line is the anticipated revenue. In the first 3 years, we're underspending each year with the knowledge the plan calls for overspending in later years and a net neutral in year 10. This next chart is similar but a little different. It has the same categories, but they're combined police and fire by category. And I think it does a good job of showing the overall priorities. The biggest expense we're proposing here is on people. The dark blue at the bottom is the pay plan implications, and it continues to grow due to steps in COLA. The lighter blue above that is new staff and those implications. That continues to grow with periodic new hires and also the steps in COLA of the previous new hires. Yellow is technology, red is the fire facility set aside. Then we have debt service and ongoing capital contributions. Those are green and orange. My final slide is just a reminder that I think bears repeating. As we've demonstrated, the plan is balanced through year 10. As we enter the second decade of this dedicated sales tax, significant consideration will need to be given to conditions at that time to arrive at a long-term funding for year 20 and beyond the expiration of the tax. We'll need to be mindful of the status of general fund expenses, property tax legislation, public safety needs, and other revenue streams, among other things. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Susan, Jill, and the chiefs. We appreciate it very much. So commissioners, as we just talk about next steps, on behalf of our team, I believe we've really arrived at a plan and a proposal that really addresses the immediate needs of the two public safety departments moving forward. And that financial sustainability is something that we're going to keep returning to. You heard it from several of our presenters today. You're going to hear us keep referring to that in the future. But with the City Commission's consideration and approval of this proposed plan on May 27th, we will immediately implement the plan and get to work on getting the pay structures implemented on July 7th. I would just note that this is going to be a highly manual process. This is something that the same team that you see here today is also undergoing that financial software overhaul at the same time. But that said, our payroll team will endeavor to get these new pay structures implemented as soon as possible, and this will be our target date of July 7th with the affirmative consideration of the City Commission on May 27th. I'll just talk briefly about the calendar. This is familiar to you, but I would just note that the public safety sales tax decision is really a key step and an integral step to the development of the entire 2026 budget. This looks familiar to you because we have our other budget dates that are material to our calendar below this, but we're in that yellow highlighted box today. You're receiving this presentation, but when we come back on May 27th, we're going to be asking for your approval, and then after that, fully integrating the sales tax proceeds that we've talked about today into that budget process. So again, a very key element and a key factor in the development of the 2026 budget. We need to really resolve this matter first before jumping into the rest of the budget for 2026. And so next I'll turn it over to Brenda Derrick, our Assistant City Administrator, who has a couple of slides and we'll share in one too.
So throughout this process, we were strategic and thoughtful on being good stewards of the public funds in addressing the pay structure adjustment to retain current and sworn employees and attract new talent, looking at additional personnel, sworn and civilian, to increase efficiency, and to invest in equipment, including tools, vehicles, and technology, and facilities, building updates and facility master plans while reducing some pressure on existing general fund, public safety-related debt service expenses. I want to acknowledge all of our city staff for the thoughtful and thorough work that they put into this proposal. This was a difficult challenge with many moving parts and competing priorities. This recommendation is truly comprehensive. It went through several iterations by staff, ultimately formulating our recommendation. We started with input from police and fire leadership, which was refined through collaboration and compromise with finance, HR, and administration. We know that a quarter-cent tax can only stretch so far, but this proposal succeeds in addressing facility and equipment needs, adding new public safety staff, and creating a pay plan to retain our current employees. In assembling this proposal, city staff used an inclusive process that took into account public safety data from around the region. We worked to identify 23 peer cities as benchmarks for police and firefighter pay. The proposal takes significant strides to increase starting pay for firefighters and police officers, putting Fargo in the upper ranks in the upper Midwest region with our peers. We are recommending a balanced proposal. Every sworn public safety employee would see at least a 3% raise, with some receiving more based on where they reside in the pay structure. This proposal recognizes that our employees are looking for more than just competitive wages. They are looking for work-life balance. By adding more boots on the ground, this will help to achieve this. The plan would also utilize about 20% of our public safety sales tax to service existing public safety-related debt, an important step in honoring our past public safety commitments.
I would also add that this plan needs to be a durable plan. That's a term that we've also referred to throughout the presentation. It's got to be one that is able to withstand the test of time, and then also be something that we can revisit every single year as elected officials move in and out of the board, as well as staff move in and out of the public safety departments. We need to make sure that that durability element is there, and that it's something that is both politically and financially durable. It's also something that has sustainability, so that we are setting up that city commission 20 years down the road with some decisions to make, certainly, but also information throughout the process about how to maintain these expenditures throughout. And that's also related to being thoughtful. Thoughtful not only for the employees of today, but the employees of tomorrow. The employees we haven't even met yet, but there will be our future employees within these public safety agencies who will come work for Team Fargo, who will contribute to the community health and vitality in our public safety services throughout the city of Fargo and our greater metro and region. So as we talk to the future and we look to May 27th, the recommended motion is actually really a three-part motion because we need to both approve the pay plan that we've talked about today and its pay structure and elements. We also need to move forward with budget adjustments and implementation steps for the 2025 budget. As referenced earlier, we've already entered into this budget year, so we know that we need to amend that with these new sales tax proceeds coming through our balance sheets yet this year. And then related to that, we also need to incorporate and implement those same dollars in 2026 as we build that in and bake it into the budget process for 2026 and beyond. So really a three-part motion on May 27th. So just a few final reminders. Again, as I mentioned at the outset, this presentation today is downloadable on the City of Fargo website at fargond.gov/PSST. And we do ask that the commission send any questions, comments to city staff throughout the next 10 days to 2 weeks before our requested action date of May 27th. But finally, I just want to close with a big thank you and piece of gratitude, not only to the folks that are gathered here at the table that assisted greatly in getting this presentation ready to go today, but also the many people seen and unseen within our departments that have helped form these recommendations, form these really critical thoughts that are helping us build the implementation model for this public safety sales tax. Really, without their efforts, without their thought leadership, we wouldn't be here today. So I just have to really take a moment to say thank you to everyone who's participated in this, both inside and outside of the presentation today. And finally, thank you, commissioners, for your time today in dedicating your afternoon just to hear this presentation. We're happy to answer any questions in our time that remains today. Thank you.
I guess we'd have to say we've been stricken by the fire hose because this is a lot of information. I think this is, for the commissioners, thank you very much for being here today. And I thank the team for working very hard on it. It's very thoughtful of how you went through it, how thoughtfully you'd use this and help it impact our safety people as well. So I do want to thank the team that worked so very hard on this because a lot of you don't know, but the iterations went back and forth and each chief had to justify who they wanted and why they wanted and what was going on. And then Joe had to explain these step issues, which we don't always get into, but somebody may go from being non-exempt to exempt, then suddenly they're making less money than they made when they were non-exempt. So every one of the ideas on the steps and the wages were very thoughtful and to do that. Any questions from the commissioners or comments? Mr. Strand?
Thank you very much. This is, of course, a lot to process and unpack. Some general thoughts. One that occurs to me is, I know we have debt service included in this projection for dispatch, but I don't see anything else for dispatch. And that's a priority I think we need to address. In my mind, when you call dispatch, I want to see one number you call, not all these different numbers. I want to see triaging beginning in the dispatch call. And I don't know how much of that's incorporated into this future, but that's my sense of what many cities are doing, and I'd like to see us consider. But yeah, and yet the debt service is included in there. Another thought that I'd like to, for my sake of understanding, this is in your categorical expenses and revenues. You go back to 2025. I'd like to see some previous years, so I have a sense of before 2025. You know, like for example, when 2025 begins, or is the beginning of this, it doesn't show any debt service because that's in the general fund. And yet we add it to it, and that becomes like 12, 13, 14% of this overall proposal. So I'd like to see a sense of what we've done before that. And I'm also curious about the debt service. And in concert with that, I'm curious how much when we come out of all this will be general fund and how much will be this special tax fund, or, so we can kind of still see what's general fund commitments. In my head, previous debts should be moved over to the debt service should be moved over to the general fund, maybe, and so on, because it's already there, it's already existing. It's in place there already. But so I'd like to look at the debt service aspects of this. I'd like to look at the dispatch aspects of this. I'd like to look at some previous years going into this so we have an actual comparison prior to the vote and to the implementation of this tax proposal and plan. That's my initial thoughts, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Turnberg.
My initial thought is a lot of thank yous are going around, but we wouldn't even be sitting here if there wasn't a group of firefighters that spent their own time, their own money, and went door to door to get voters to pass this at almost 70%, because they knew that they were underpaid. They wanted to improve public safety in Fargo, and voters agreed. So I think a thank you should absolutely be sent out to them that we're even sitting here and have this money to spend, which in my mind, what if we didn't have this tax? We're just getting to normal. This isn't even anything extravagant. This should be core city funding that's done without a tax, in my mind. So I would like to see, to make sure that those who were boots on the ground that got this tax paid, if this is in line to what their vision was, because we can all have all sorts of meetings and get together and consultants and this and that, but they did it for a reason. They have an expectation, and I just want to know if that's being met.
Mr. Kolpak.
Yeah, thank you for the work, and agree with many of the comments there, Commissioner Turnberg. I would like to start, I have several questions. The first is, is directed to Chief Dirksen. If you could speak to how the salary data cross-references with the research that you did and brought to the table as part of this conversation and working with HR and others, and where we landed. I'd like that to be my first question.
Sure. Now, back in 2018, that's where we came up with a lot of these cities early on. That was the comparables that we had talked about. Chief Todd was here at the time from the police department. He and I worked, and we worked with HR and determined those comparable cities were determined back then. And we've used them over time, over the last 7-8 years, as comparable cities. As I look through it, I've done my own work on the base salary side. Yes, it's very comparable, but there are other things that would need to be addressed, that there are variable pays and things like that. We have that information, but in order to incorporate that into this plan, we didn't have enough time to get that figured out. And that's one of the things I believe staff is committed to going forward, is looking at how we can incorporate that. But there's a greater thing that needs to be looked at, but the key is to get that base pay up. And we're within that range where I think we're going to be market competitive. When you see a firefighter starting out at $65,000 this year in that next group that we're going to hire, and when they complete 6 months out of that training step, they're going to be at $68,250, and 6 months later, they're going to be over $71,000. That gets us very close. And again, this is for half a year and a year. This gets us to that mark. And then the commitment moving forward is to continue to look at this, keep making sure that we maintain market competitiveness. And again, $8.5 million sounds like a lot of money, but when we have all of these other needs, we also have to make sure that we can finance that going forward. And I think that, I'm comfortable with where the numbers are at today. But that has to be, we have to engage going forward. But I think Jill alluded to it as well, as having that compensation philosophy, and you guys as the commission setting that these are the cities we want to be compared to. Then you set it, then we know. And then it's easy to move forward. Then the MRA can really 15 communities, and we can dial in and get that information dialed in even better than what we get, because sometimes there's always not that great understanding of all the data, but I think we're within a margin of error that I'm comfortable.
Okay, thank you. You touched on my next two questions. The first was how we're going to land on the 15 comparable cities for annual review. And then the second was annual review process. What will that look like? And will it include review of other benefits and even non-paid changes to staffing and other things that can happen as far as wellness and quality of life? Brenda, to your point. And so I just want to make sure that be part of the process. That was my comment. The other point I want to make is, yes, this does include some of the debt service moving forward, but I know part of the messaging from the team that got this sales tax passed was the hope that the general fund, it alleviates some of the pressure so that all of Team Fargo is going to see an impact in the result of this change moving forward, and how is it sustainable longer term. So I was glad to hear that. My last point, and you also touched on this, Chief, is, and maybe this is a question for Michael and Brenda, at the May 29th, I'm broken record on this one, retreat. It will include conversation around what is the overall budget master capital plan and associated personnel across the departments for sustainability, especially given the 3% cap. So I just wanted to earmark that. I think those are my questions and comments. Thank you.
So just on Commissioner Strand's comment on the dispatch center, when the dispatch center was originally designed or brought up, it was thought to be possibly a $12 million cost. I think, Chief, we're at 15 million, something like that at that point. And county put in 12 million. They said, we're putting in 12 million. Anything extra has to be paid by West Fargo and Fargo. We do have a grant in for $1 million, $1.5 million in Minnesota, trying to relieve some of the relief on the city of Fargo and West Fargo, John. But then we do have to come up with what's left in that debt. As far as the function goes, Chief can tell you, we've got the highest functioning dispatch center you'll get, and with changes we made in the new dispatch center, will be better, because it'll be more capacity, more people, the ability. And just like the other day, we're talking about fire, how can increase the time we can get out there sometimes. If they say fire, boom, we go right away. But if it's a medical problem, sometimes it takes a while to discern that, then the delays are getting out there. But already now, Station 8 has really made a big difference in our ability to get Southside Fargo. But to your question, John, there is debt that went with that we have to ascertain. So far, we have had it in our budget. This may help relieve some of that and need to do that as well. But they'll get you those answers that you'd like in that regard. Any other comments, Dave, anything? No.
I do, Mayor.
Mr. Strand?
I'm just curious, we're talking public safety today and that arena, which is a chunk of our budget. But what about all the other positions? I wasn't on the position evaluation committee. My sense is that when you have a whole lay of the land of all these different positions and steps and lanes, the equity issue is important, and comparative equity from one department to the next department to the next department. I'm just curious, what's the implication of this going the road? If we have a couple departments elevating up, does that require us to lift everybody else? You talked about the big picture, but will this have challenges for us to find these balances? Or I don't know. I'm guessing that's an HR challenge.
Yeah, that's a great question. So public safety pay structure has been tied to the rest of the city's pay structure for years. And in 2018, the plan we implemented, 2019, was kind of the first time that it became more of a hybrid plan, the public safety plan, where those minimum rates were still tied to our regular structure, but the range spread, so the ability for growth within that pay structure expanded, and the increases, the step increases expanded as well. So again, starting 2019 to present, they've been on more of a hybrid structure. Minimum still tied, but the top rates were not tied to our current structure. So this will completely create a separate pay structure for public safety, which we've really come to the point where that's necessary in order to maintain that market competitiveness. That said, we can't forget that we have 2/3 of our, regular workforce is not covered under the public safety plan. And I mentioned earlier, we did bring forward a proposed pay structure change for all employees last year that would have made all positions and the overall pay structure more market competitive. We weren't able to implement that last year. The 4.5% COLA, being a higher COLA, certainly helped us move in that direction, but there's definitely more work to be done on all positions across the city. It remains to be seen if there will be any room within the 26 budget to make any adjustments, but we'll continue working on a plan to address all positions, both in terms of structure, but again, making sure that we're doing those surveys of other benchmark positions to help determine that market competitiveness.
And John, we've done budget talks, and we do get a little frustrated when one of our department heads comes in and said, we trained this person 6 months, they're ready to go, and boom, they go out into the regular market. So we have to stay market competitive, because we really lose on that when we train somebody, get them ready to do something, and then boom, they go to another market or go somewhere else. So we will continue to do that. Any other comments, Mike? We were trying to keep close to an hour and a half.
That is correct. And again, thank you, commissioners, for your time. And Commissioner Strand, thank you for your last comment there. That we will very much take to heart, because that is something, as we talk about next steps, that's an important message for our employees. And that is something that we need to continue to carry forward, because that market competitiveness issue, we face in every corner of the organization. And that's something that every single year, especially after the COVID pandemic, it's just been that much more intense. So I appreciate your comment and sensitivity to that.
And then your packets broke down in greater detail for everything. Again, on some of the stuff in HR, please talk to Joe, because the steps and grades are a little confusing at times. And then with Mike and Brenda, if there's things, or Susan, that you think about and want to talk about, please do that. Would like to have the motions that we have put forth here at our next commission meeting, and would like, if there's some things you want to change, please tell us so we could address it at that meeting. Thank you.